Welcome to You May Have Heard, where we take news stories and see if they're a bunch of yorundo or not. So, another year, another byline of a Christmas truce between Ukraine and Russia. If you grew up in Britain, France or Germany, you may be familiar with the Christmas Truce of World War I, a series of spontaneous ceasefires that took place mainly on the Western Front around Christmas 1914, during the first winter of the war. British, French and German soldiers emerged from their trenches into no man's land, often after hearing Christmas carols sung by the other side. They exchanged greetings, food, cigarettes, booze and photographs. Units worked together to recover and bury the dead, some of whom had been lying between the lines for weeks. Most famously, a football match was held by the British and German sides. But generally, war is not a business for the sentimental. This feel-good tale of humanity masks a bitter truth. Truces are almost always about regrouping troops and re-establishing supply lines, the most crucial part of a campaign. A unique moment where both sides feel there is more to be gained than lost from a lull in fighting. They're difficult to get off the ground, as they suffer from the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is a game theory problem showing how two rational actors acting in their own self-interest can both end up worse off than if they had cooperated. Each prisoner has an incentive to betray the other, regardless of what their fellow participant does, making betrayal the rational choice, even though mutual cooperation would produce a better outcome. The dilemma illustrates why cooperation is hard to sustain without trust, communication, or enforcement mechanisms. Command and control needs to be tight as well. A truce is useless if units can't be reliably restrained. This alone rules out most spontaneous truces. The World War I example had two frontline combatants that had local autonomy. They lacked modern surveillance that would have got the higher-ups giving them an earful. So why all this talk of a ceasefire every year without it actually happening? The first major proposal was in 2023. The truce proposal was rejected by the Ukrainian authorities, who called it a cynical trap. Despite the ceasefire being declared, it had little effect as fighting persisted. The Wagner Group, about 10% of Russia's total forces in Ukraine at the time, did not commit to the ceasefire and was not ordered to observe it. Indeed, these truces are always strategic in nature.
And that's one of the reasons, I guess, why it's so important for Ukraine to not relent at this juncture, because they can see, it's very clear that the Russians are actually really under the pump. Their campaigns, their offensive operations, they've been conducted around Bakhmut have been relatively unsuccessful. And that is in large part because they've run out of morale, they've run out of momentum, they've run out of spare parts, and they're running low on ammunition. Now that can get resupplied over time. But at the moment, the Ukrainians, I think, are in a position to press on. But the balance of power is fairly fine at the moment. The Ukrainians, having been so successful in the
presidential Methuselah Joe Biden said, but when he'd woken up, he stated that the truce proposal was merely a breather for Russian forces and a chance for them to reform.
I found it interesting. He was ready to bomb hospitals and nurseries and churches, and on the 25th and New Year's, and I think he's trying to find some oxygen.
While Ukrainian forces are under immense pressure, Russian forces are stretched incredibly thin as well, and Putin regularly looks for excuses to regroup. There is also a propagandistic element. Former Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said in 2023 that Putin offered the hand of Christian mercy to Ukraine, but because Ukraine lacked faith, it had rejected Putin's offer. A pro-Russian Chechen commander took the opportunity to praise Putin's Christmas ceasefire initiative as an action of a true believing Christian, adding a statement about Jesus' prophethood in Islam and accusing Ukraine of Satanism for rejecting the truce. The Institute for the Study of War regarded this message as part of a specific and long-running Kremlin information operation that seeks to cater to various religious minority groups in the Russian armed forces by framing Ukraine as an immoral enemy whose lack of faith offends Christian and Muslim alike. So pardon me if I find the whole "Putin is the saviour of Western Christian virtue" line a bit dubious, as this isn't even the only holiday truce the Kremlin has asked for and then failed to uphold. In 2024, Hungary's Viktor Orban said he tried to emulate that spirit of goodwill by proposing a symbolic Christmas ceasefire and a prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine. He called Vladimir Putin, talked to him for an hour, and then teamed up with the Kremlin to pin the blame on Zelensky for rejecting the Christmas truce. Unsurprisingly, he told a fib about who was to blame. This year, many stories say the lull in fighting is trying to be made more permanent. Trump said he wants to see an end of the war by Christmas. Never heard that one before. Indeed, these ceasefire proposals are mostly propaganda, meant for domestic or nearby consumption, or a punt designed to see if the Ukrainians are stupid enough to take him up on the fake proposal. It's very Putin. If you agree, I get what I want on the battlefield. If you don't, I get what I want in the propaganda war. He loves presenting his opponents with no-win options.
Europe wants Putin to unilaterally quit from Ukraine. And Trump is saying, actually, that can't happen, that won't happen. Ukraine is going to have to surrender something in order to get Putin to withdraw for the war to end. And everyone says, well, this is appeasement, pure and simple. And of course, the real issue is that if Putin is unable to spin this as anything else other than a defeat, he will lose power in Russia, he will be removed. And that actually could be more dangerous for Europe than Putin staying. Because if we do arm Ukraine, if we do enable them to physically kick Russia out of Ukraine, then Putin may decide to escalate. He may be forced to escalate because that will be his only means of survival. And so Europe feels that we have to respond now, whereas Trump is trying to bring him to the negotiating table. If he can spin Ukraine as a victory to the Russian people, he will go back to Russia, he will rearm, and he will try again, or he may attack another NATO state. And that is a realistic fear, and really justifies Europe's stance.
So give Putin an off-ramp and he comes back with a vengeance. Don't give him an off-ramp and someone else does. He really does love a no-win situation.